Hi, everybody. My name is Nicholas PHAN, and I am the Artistic Director of Collaborative Arts Institute of Chicago, and I'm one of the regular hosts of our online conversation series, Heard Over the Piano. Today's guest is a very special guest, our dear friend and a longtime friend of CAIC, Juliet Petrus. So Juliet, if you'd like to join us, please unmute yourself and bring your video in. Just a reminder, if anybody has any questions for Juliet, please just throw them into the chat and we will be sure to ask them of her. So, how are you?
How is anybody? That's kind of a loaded question, isn't it? I mean, it's I'm fine. I mean, I'm well. My family's well.
Good.
Um, we're locked up in London, where things change day by day, in terms of what we can and cannot do. But for the most part, we are well. We are well.
Great.
Yeah.
And so you've got a long history with us, right? I think my video just froze. That's really fun. Oh no. Anyway, I'm still here.
I hear you. It's okay.
Good. Also, everybody, if you notice that we have technical issues and you'd like to say something about those, also please put those in the chat. I'm gonna have to, let's see.
There you are.
Yeah, that's fun. I just wonder why my camera is not working.
That's good.
We'll edit this later. Oh my gosh. Okay. Anyway, so I'm gonna keep asking you questions while I figure this out. But you've got a long history with us, right? You sang in our first house concert, right? You're like one of our founding members. You were part of our initial core staff of people that was making things go. And
Yes, yes, yes. I mean, I was based in Chicago at the time, and of course, you and I have a very long history together. And Shannon and Nicholas and the whole team. And I was very excited that CAIC was, of course, coming into fruition because it was desperately needed in Chicago. There were big opera houses. There were obviously there are internationally renowned symphonies and other organizations, but there was nothing that was specifically speaking to art song, which of course is very dear to both of us. And so CIAC entered upon the scene and led the way.
and here we are. And
And
so
here
you
we
came
are.
back to, right? You came back and you did 2 leader launches with us, right? You did one that was curated by Louise Smith, one of
That's
our
right.
advisory board members,
That's right. We
about
did
Paul
Debussy.
Verlaine.
Yeah, Debussy, right? Exactly.
And then you did one on Chinese art song, which is
Yeah, which popped up in my Facebook like memory the other day as as a happening. It was 5 years ago, and I can't believe that it was right around this time of year, about 5 years ago. And it was to release our CD, my CD with Lydia Cho, who's a beautiful pianist based in Ann Arbor. And yeah, that was our launch. You helped us launch the CD a great distance.
well, I mean, we were so lucky to be able to do that. I mean, it's such a visionary project. And I mean, I feel like what we're about at CAIC is innovation and kind of pushing boundaries in terms of what art song is and how we engage with it. So it was kind of the perfect opportunity for us. So I was really grateful that you trusted us to give you this launch for that. So let's back up. I mean, you and I obviously have known each other since basically childhood. I mean, we met each other playing in some godforsaken youth orchestra viola section somewhere in southeastern Michigan. And we've been lifelong friends.
And we have, yeah.
And then we went to Michigan together, and
Yeah.
we both sort of switched from being string players. You a very good one, me a very deeply average one. We switched from being string players to being singers, and we studied with the same teacher. And so,
Yes.
like after that, is that when you moved to Chicago for a while?
I did. I think when yeah, we both graduated. We graduated the same year, and I think you went off to New York because, of course, all of this was happening in September of 2001. I went to Chicago. I saw two of my dearest friends head off to New York City, and then September 11th happened, and that was what launched me into my master's degree, which really makes you sort of question, at least it did to me, what is the purpose of what we do in the world, against the backdrop of everything that happened during 9/11. Yeah, that's how I ended up in Chicago and finished my degree at Northwestern, in voice performance. At that point, I had kind of said goodbye to my viola connection. I keep it comes back and forth, right? It always goes back in. I don't know if you still play. I still have my instrument sitting in the corner, and she comes out every so often when I am frustrated with singing.
I really envy that you can still do that. Like I've tried to pick up a violin maybe 10, no. Oh my gosh, it was nearly 15 years ago, but I was obviously well into adulthood as we are not children. And oh
No.
my God, it was truly horrifying. I thought to myself, I'm a
Oh
professional musician. How is that possible that I can make sound this bad? Um,
no. I'm sure it's not. It's all in there. It's all in there. I think it's a long distance, right, to come out the arm. It just takes a little bit. It's a shorter distance to come out of your mouth. So
I always felt that way. So
yeah, so that's how I ended up in Chicago, and then I ended up staying there um for 15 years. Yeah, 15 years because I came in 2001, and then we departed the United States in 2016.
and so you met your husband there, right?
I met
And
my husband there. Yes, my husband.
you had your
Um,
son there.
had my son there. Yep. Chicago was our home for many, many years, and still obviously have very dear friends who are in Chicago and associated with Chicago. I still have, yeah, I mean, I think I worked with pretty much every. I'm really not exaggerating. I think I worked with every performing arts organization that dealt with singers in Chicago at one point in the 15 years that I was there. Um, so I had the full Chicago experience.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, yeah.
So outside of Chicago, though, while you're still based in the States, you did a lot of stuff around the country and I mean internationally too, right? You were at Glimmerglass for a
Yeah,
while.
that was all while I was in Chicago. That was 2007, 2008. That was sort of the tail end of my young artist years, and it was a wonderful program. Um, but very traditionally opera. It was like my first young artist program was Sarasota Opera down in Florida, which I did. I took a semester off of my master's to go and do that program, came back and graduated, and then did stuff in North Carolina at Opera Carolina, eventually did Glimmerglass. So was really kind of squarely on this young artist path. At around that time too, I had just gotten married and we wanted to start a family. My son was born in 2009, and it was after 2009 that things started taking this path that I had. I mean, certainly when we knew each other, had like no one would have predicted that this is where I was going to end up. Yeah, I was doing things internationally on a smaller scale. And when my son was born, was doing more concert work. Just flexibility was easier, and the time commitment, of course, is shorter than going and spending 5 or 8 weeks at a theater to prepare an opera. Um, and then enter the dragon, enter China.
Right. So I mean, here you are, you're doing this very kind of traditional Western operatic career. Like you're sailing through young artist programs, very good ones. You're getting amazing opportunities. I mean, didn't you sing a leading role in like that Offenbach opera or something at Glimmerglass? And
Oh yeah, that was one of those sort of dream situations where you're given young artists oftentimes are given understudies, right? You have to prepare the role. I have a tendency, so my voice, I'm a very high coloratura soprano. Uh, I sing a lot of Carmina Burana, which I think you do too, or did. I don't know. Do you still sing Carmina?
yes, and
Okay.
Anybody who's listening, when we
You
come
got
back to it,
you got a
we will
pair.
be singing. We will happily sing your Carmina Buranas anywhere once
I've
we
got
come back to
so
it.
many red dresses that look beautiful on stage.
It's the
Anyway,
most profitable 39 seconds of singing in my entire career.
Joy, you have a much well, no, but I can't say that it's easier because it's like
It's not easy for anybody.
no, it's not not an easy. Okay, so I will make it, it's not a competition, Juliet. It's not a competition.
Yeah, I know. We are
No,
in solidarity with each other.
we get solidarity with each other. So yeah, I sing a lot of Carmina, I sing a lot of Queen of the Night, and then because I come from a dance background and because I originally entered theater through the choreography door as a musical theater choreographer in my teens and early 20s, I end up getting called, I think, to do a lot of operetta because my voice is rather light. I'm good with physical comedy. I'm a good mover and a dancer. So yeah, Offenbach at Glimmerglass. It was, the night before opening night, which happened to be the opening night of the season because the Offenbach was opening that. And I was sitting on the floor in another rehearsal and was dragged out by the AD and said, "She's sick. You gotta go get ready." And it was just sort of, one of those, what's gonna happen? And then, of course, you're prepared, and I'm always overly prepared. So because that's
Say the
just who I am.
least.
Yeah, and went on and made it through. And I think I ended up having to sing two or three of those shows because she was indisposed.
Wow. Well, obviously our condolences to her, but what a
Absolutely.
wonderful opportunity that was for you. So you're doing this, I mean, you're having great success doing this thing. And then, I mean, how did China come into the picture? I mean, I remember one of the things that I've always loved about you and remember about you is that you have always been fascinated with language. I mean, even when we were in college, you were taking like the advanced levels of every single of standard language that we could possibly take. Um,
Yeah.
so,
So yeah. So um, China happened in probably around this time of year in 2009. And I was sitting on my couch flipping through Yap Tracker, which is a website for singers that has a lot of listings for programs. And this one popped up. And of course, the application was due that day. And luckily enough, of course, and luckily enough, I was looking at it in the morning, and so I kind of sprang into action and sent out my emails. I needed like letters of recommendation. I needed like a 500 word or 1,000 word essay as to why. And this program, which at the time was called I Sing Beijing, but is now called I Sing International Young Artist Programs, and it's no longer based in Beijing. It's based in Suzhou in the south of China. Um, it was innovative for so many reasons. It was the first program that was going to be bringing Western singers to China. Our founder, my mentor, Ha Zhangtian, who is a fabulous bass coming from China, coming from Beijing. He and his wife, Martha Liao, have for many, many years had brought Chinese singers to the West, specifically to the United States, to study and to support. And so he wanted to flip the script, and he wanted to take Western singers to China. And what caught me first of all was that it was tuition free, which it still is, and that's amazing because it was going to be 5 weeks in Beijing. And in addition to, of course, learning Chinese music, learning about culture, and of course having all these cultural experiences, the thing that got me, which you've already said, was that we were going to be given daily Mandarin lessons. I have this sort of unspoken, I guess it's spoken now because I'm about to say it, rule with myself, which is that I don't like to sing in languages that I don't speak, just because there's something about having that connection to the language and ultimately then the culture that you're singing in or about, that only comes from that sort of intimacy with the language. So I knew that if I was going to sing in Mandarin, I wanted to at least, know what was going on, have a certain, if not basic level of fluency. And then, and so that's what kind of, determined it for me. So like I said, I got all my application stuff in, sent it off on the day. And then I got an invitation to go audition. I went out to Denver in a snowstorm. Don't drive in Denver in a snowstorm. I'm from Michigan. I thought I knew it was coming. They do
It's not
not
the
plow.
same.
They do not plow the roads because everybody has four-wheel drive. It was terrifying. I went to the audition. I think I forgot my music at the location afterwards. They had to FedEx it back to me. I mean, it was really kind of a disaster in terms of, the experience. And I walked out of there thinking, well, like, okay, we'll see. Um, and then a couple weeks later, got the email that said, congratulations, you're going to be part of our inaugural class of I Sing. And then comes the question, how do you navigate 5 weeks away from a 1.5-year-old? And luckily, of course, you know my husband Adolfo very well, and you know how supportive he is. And so we made it. We made it work. We made it work through daily FaceTime calls, and just it was the first real test of us being in such a different time zone, in such a different place. And it's hard to believe that that was so foreign at the time, and it has now just become part of the norm. Well, until last year it did.
Right. I know it's so funny. Like we're so used to being apart from our significant others, which is such torture and so awful and so challenging. And then now it's so challenging to be with each other all the time.
I think we determined that we probably have spent more time together in this past year than we have at least in the 5 years combined.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh.
Yeah, because my husband travels a lot for work as well.
Right.
Leading up to 2020, was spending about half my year in China. Yeah, definitely. There were a few years where I didn't have even enough days in the country that I'm living in to consider me a resident. Um, so yeah, uh, it can be, it's challenging on both sides, right? They're
Yeah,
both extremes. So
exactly. But it's a mark of success that you are, you have these challenges. It's also worth mentioning that Adolfo has waved hello on the Facebook chat to you.
oh, good, he's watching.
And
Okay,
we're also
thanks.
very grateful to Adolfo because he's also on our board and he's been on our board since almost the beginning. So
Yeah.
we love Adolfo. Actually, I was sad the last time I was in London. I was singing with the London Symphony, I think, and I I saw Adolfo, but I didn't see you because you were gallivanting around somewhere fancy.
Yeah, maybe not so
Probably
fancy.
China.
Probably China or maybe Austria. I don't remember, but yeah.
Um, so okay, so you go and you do this thing, you study Chinese, you figured out the whole like 1.5-year-old situation. Adolfo deserves a crown and a superhero cape. Um, so how was the experience? Did you love it? Like, was it transformative?
It was absolutely transformative. It was absolutely transformative, in a way that I remember. I don't remember. I know that we spent some time together at Interlaken too in Michigan growing up, didn't
Yes,
we?
we did.
We did. Okay. But prior to that, prior to Interlaken, I went to Blue Lake, which is another, I think it still exists. It must exist. Another wonderful music program in northwestern Michigan in the summertime. And they had an international, different ensembles, international band, international choral ensemble. And I was like 12 or 13 when I went with their international choral ensemble to Europe. And when I came back from that, I remember very clearly my dad saying to me, "You came back a completely different person." It had been my first experience as an American going abroad. And we were in Austria and Germany and France. And I came back, and I think that's where really my love for language was ignited. That realization that you know people speak more than English in the world, and that if you can speak other languages, you can communicate with so many people. So this was an equivalent experience coming. First of all, landing in China, it was so disorienting, so completely different. But we were so very well taken care of in terms of, even getting us from point A to point B, which um, you take for granted. I think when you're in a country where the language has some sort of a relatable basis, whether it's another Germanic language or another Romantic language, and you can look at a sign and at least sound out what you're saying. And when you get to China and literally it's just symbols and lines and dots, and you have no, if you don't speak Chinese, you don't speak Chinese. You really have no way of knowing what is in front of you. So we were taken care of very well. And I remember going into that first class, and of course, Mandarin is a tonal language, and just thinking, why did nobody ever say to me or to any other singer or musician, look at this, like, here, why don't you guys study this tonal language that equates symbol and sound? Because that's our business. I mean, that's what we do. Um, and not only did I fall in love with the language, I fell in love with, of course, this ancient history that's everywhere, especially in Beijing, and the just the differences in culture and food. Of course, I'm a huge fan of all Chinese food, um, and
You're not alone there.
I know. Um, and then ultimately, my experience on stage there was unlike anything I had ever experienced. We did our final concert at the National Center for the Performing Arts in Beijing, which, if you look it up, is this beautiful, like, it looks like an egg, like half an egg, with all these windows, and it's just really stunning. And on the inside, it's equally stunning. And I walked on stage to sing that first year. They were being very kind to us. They didn't make us sing individual songs, solos by ourselves. We were sort of splitting up songs, because I think they really weren't sure, how quickly we were going to be taking to this lyric diction, Mandarin lyric diction. And I walked out on stage and I sang the opening line to a very, very famous song in China called "我爱你中国," which means "I love you, China." Sort of and it has images sort of like "God Bless America," where you're talking about, like, the landscape and the trees and the rolling hills. And went out and I sang the opening line, and I don't even think I finished the opening phrase, and the entire audience just goes,
Wow.
and you're sort of like, this is what a rock star feels like. Because of course, you know, we as classical singers, we don't get that sort of enthusiasm on a regular basis. At least I don't. Except for when I'm in China, and the Chinese audiences are just so um, effusive with their excitement, and it literally just bubbles over, and it's hard not to be really impacted by that when you're on stage.
So, wow, sounds like you felt very welcomed and very embraced.
Yes.
And that must be really rewarding. So, you obviously got a little addicted, and so you went back again.
The program was and continues to be very generous and very supportive with their young artists. Uh, we went back, I think, so that was summer of 2011. And then we went back December 2011. I was back there in 2012 as well, as a participant again, which at the end of that summer brought about another big opportunity that I didn't see coming. Um, and then, I think every year since, there's been some sort of activity, whether in China or in the United States or even here in Europe, that I sing has brought and has given to me and to the other young artists in the program.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, is it government sponsored at all?
It was well. It has sort of it's changed. Their sponsorship has changed over the years. So when it started, it was sponsored by an organization in the United States, and Hanban, which is the arm of the Chinese government which supports Chinese language and culture learning abroad, which otherwise is known as the Confucius Institutes in the United States, or was known as the Confucius Institutes in the United States. And as a result, the first 2 years that I was there, the 2 summers that I participated directly in as a participant, and not just as a guest performer, the teaching that we had, our language teachers were university level, professors of Chinese for foreign language as for foreigners, and I'm sure that's why I learned so much of it. Um, and now, because they have changed locations and they have changed uh, sponsorship, they are in Suzhou, and they're sponsored by the city of Suzhou, or an element of the city of Suzhou, and the fine arts, the performing arts center that's there.
Wonderful. Um, Sounds like a lot of resources, which,
Mm.
I mean, that's wonderful. Um, so you did this for a while. You started touring as a result, touring this material with sort of touring programs from from ICING, what was ICING Beijing and is now
I
ICING.
sing International Young Artist Program.
And
Yeah.
then somewhere in there, you decided I'm going to make an album. So
So yeah. So all of this started because of I Sing, and then in around end of 2012, things started to branch out a little bit. So, like I said, Hanban had been the sponsor in those first 2 years in Beijing. And at the end of my second year, I was offered a scholarship by the Confucius Institute to go to China to study Mandarin, just the language. And I remember the woman who was giving the speech, who was the vice president of Hanban, kind of caught me off guard because I was very much singled out, and she said, we want you to come to China and study Chinese. And I thought to myself, that's awesome. And then I thought, that's never going to happen because, of course, I still have now I have a toddler at home, and I'm teaching, and I'm performing, and things are the the calendar is what it is. Um, but in 2014, there was a big hole in the calendar, and I went back to my husband and I said, "Look, I think this scholarship may still be there." One of my dreams was always to study a foreign language in that place. All the languages that I'd studied over the years, I'd never studied abroad. I always studied in the United States. And then when I would have information or have opportunities to go abroad, of course, I would use them. But I thought, my gosh, this could be finally my study abroad, opportunity. So we talked about it, and I was only going to go for a semester. I had the opportunity to go for a year, but it was just, that was going to be very, very complicated at this point in my life. So I said, I'll go for a semester. And he said, well, if you want to go, why don't you take Amadeo with you? Amadeo is my son, who at the time was 4. And I thought, sure, why not? So I found a university in Shanghai, Tongji, which is a wonderful, wonderful school, known in China primarily for its architecture program, but it has a fantastic international language program as well. And got in touch with the very, very generous women in the office there who run the program. And I said, look, I'm coming. I have a son. Can you help me enroll him? And so we went to Tongji, and I went to the university, and he went to the kindergarten every day while I studied. We'd meet up in the afternoon and study and play and explore Shanghai. And it was while I was there that they said, that the 2 women who ran the program said, we'd like to produce a recital for you. And one of the reasons I had chosen Shanghai, there were a number of reasons that I had chosen Shanghai, but one of them was because one of my other mentors who I'd met through the ICING program, Wei Fugen, was a professor at the Shanghai Conservatory. And I wanted to be able to study language and then, of course, go and work with him on repertoire. So that's essentially what happened. And then when they gave me this opportunity to say, okay, in 12 weeks at the end of the semester, we'd like for you to sing a recital. That's what really launched all of it. That was my very first all Chinese recital in China, by myself. And I don't think I've ever done anything more terrifying, honestly. I don't know if you feel this way. Like, there is something performing native language pieces for native language audience that is like, they know if you make a mistake, right? There's no hiding. And of course, it was in a language that I still was developing my relationship with. But I also like a good challenge. So that's what we did. We did the recital. And when I came back from that, um, that's when I said, okay, I've got to keep looking for opportunities to perform this repertoire. And I've got to find ways to introduce this repertoire outside of China. So what's the best way to do that? And that led me to wanting to produce a CD.
And you came back home and did you record the CD back here or did you record it in China?
I recorded it actually in Ann Arbor. Because that's where my pianist Lydia Cho is based, and we knew that there was a lovely studio in Ann Arbor that we knew other colleagues had used and had a really excellent product. And so I went there, and I think we recorded in 4 days, maybe
Oh my
3 days.
gosh, that's so luxurious.
Yeah, I know. I know you've done. I know you've done. I don't know how you do your recording process, honestly, because by the end of 3 days, and they were like 5 hour days, my voice was like, I was like, oh, I'm not sure that I want anybody to hear what's coming out of my mouth right now, like on, recorded for posterity. My goodness.
Yeah, no. I think the most extreme that we ever did was when we were recording what was my second album.
Hmm.
It included like the complete works for harp and voice by Benjamin Britten,
Hmm.
and that was like an 11-hour day.
Do
Yeah.
you have a voice? I don't.
I remember going in for a voice lesson the next day and being wiped. And my teacher was like, this is actually really valuable. And it ended up being a really great lesson, but oh my God, like you learn what you're made of in those days. And actually, I think I don't know. I mean, I was young and I have been blessed with something that's like Teflon-ish, knock wood,
Yeah.
in here. And
Yes.
so, that helped, but it was mostly the mental thing. And poor Sivan, like I could like see his brain coming out of his ears, like at the end of the day. So anyway, 5 days of 5 hour sessions sounds so luxurious. That's fantastic that you were able to do that.
Yeah, yeah, it was. We had 25 tracks, so I'm not sure that your CDs are that long. I mean, I know we had a lot of repertoire we wanted to cover. And the CD was this combination of both Chinese art song and American art song based on Chinese texts, so translations of Chinese art song or Chinese poetry,
Poetry.
yeah, set by American composers. Um, yeah, and that's what, led me to do, of course, my launch through CAIC, and and to just open up even more opportunities. This was the point where I started really making connections outside of icing. And I've been very fortunate. And I think another reason I have continued to go back to China is just because for me, one door always seems to open the next. And the fact that I love it, the fact that I'm good at it, uh, and the fact that, you know, there's it's sort of like the path of least resistance, with which, of course, in our profession, like if it shows up, just walk through the door,
Right.
So that's the production of this CD with Lydia led to a number of years where she and I were doing mini tours in China, going to conservatories, doing um, recitals, and then master classes, which then ultimately led me to connect with other singers, which ultimately led me to my agent in China, which led us to a 10 city tour in 2018 and 2019. So again, just sort of like, just, one thing to the next. And I love being there, and I love the music, and I love the people. So yes, please. Yes, more.
So, I mean, you said that, I mean, what's amazing about this is that it was born in China and it sounds like, I mean, particularly the sort of focus on it was really encouraged by Chinese people. And I mean, I'm wondering what it's like to be, I mean, you're very white. And
I am.
uh, so what is that? I mean, was that part of what made you nervous in that first concert? And like, I mean, what has your experience been of kind of being a white person, a non-Chinese person or a non-Asian person singing this repertoire in Asia?
I think so. There's the musical part of it, and then there's just the sociology sort of study of it, which is that um, it was my first time being a minority somewhere. Um, it was incredibly eye-opening. I'm very lucky that uh, Chinese people as a culture are very welcoming, very curious, very kind. I can't tell you, especially when I was in China with my son, how many people would simply ask if, if they would like, if they could accompany us to the Disney store, or if, if he wanted to join them playing in a park. I mean, I'm always overwhelmed by the warmth of the people when I'm there. I'm sure that it helps that I speak the language, uh, because I've also had experiences where people are very afraid of me, where in some cases I have a very clear memory of a train ride where I was sitting by myself and a gentleman came and sat next to me, was visibly shaking when he sat next to me. And I thought, what's wrong? And and I couldn't tell what was going on. And he pulled out his phone to look at a video, and I asked him in Chinese. I said, "Oh, what are you watching?" And he was, "You speak Chinese? Oh my gosh, I was so nervous. I've never sat next to a white person before. I didn't know if I was going to be able to communicate with you." And all of this stuff just came pouring out. Um, I think it's an incredibly important experience for any white person to be a minority somewhere, to go somewhere where you are going to stick out simply because of the way that you look. Um, there is, yeah, there's great education in that. In terms of singing, um, I think it's fair to say I'm not joking. I'm not trying to poke fun at it at all, but there is a lot of attention paid in Chinese television and culture to white people doing stuff in Chinese. There are big festivals of programs, lots of talent shows for foreigners doing things in Chinese, and I think a first of all, they are very appreciative when anybody makes the effort to understand or try to speak. Chinese, of course, is a very difficult language, and anybody who makes the effort is rewarded handsomely in terms of, you could even if you only say a few words well in Chinese, even if you don't say them well in Chinese, if you try, you will be complimented for that effort. Um, Chinese audiences, like I said, are just some of the warmest in the world in terms of enthusiasm. They are also very young audiences in the sense that classical music is still developing there. Of course, classical music disappeared for the majority of, well, for all of the Cultural Revolution. And so we're not talking about a huge amount of time where opera and Western music, Western classical music has been studied. There are obviously magnificent players and singers who live and study in China. But audiences are still developing. So
So you really
you
still feel the gap of those years there?
you do, you
Because
do.
I mean, there's history before that, but that's interesting to know.
Hmm. Yeah. So there is always an element of flash. It's hard to be. I could do an entire lecture on Chinese art song, and it would be very pedantic, and it would be, very verbose for sure, and that's not going to fly over there. There needs to be something that's engaging, and of course my voice does flash very well. That's kind of what, color tours do. So it's always a fun balance of music that is known to them, opera, and then art song and other songs sung in Chinese. And I am very lucky that my responses has obviously been good enough that I want to keep going back.
Well, I mean, obviously you're well received too because you're doing it excellently and at a high level, which I'm sure is really appreciated. The way you're describing, they appreciate if you speak at all. So
Yes.
if you're delivering that kind of level of performance, and especially in regards to the language, I
Yes.
would imagine that that's really meaningful.
Mhm.
Part of the reason I ask is, I mean, I read this article recently by a scholar at Michigan named Kira Thurman called Performing Leader Hearing Race. I think that's
Mhm.
the title of the article. And she talks a lot about the experience of Black singers going over to Germany and Austria
Mhm.
at the beginning, at the early half of last century, and how what that experience was like.
Mhm.
And one of the things she goes into is sort of how German Lieder is sort of a there's a crow outside that is so loud. I hope you can't hear that. Um, there's something about German Lieder that's like a national art form, and it has a lot of cultural significance for German people as representatives of Germanness. And
Mhm.
language is so powerful in that way in general for every culture, I think. And when you throw the like race into the
Mhm.
mix, I mean, even though race is a construct, et cetera, et cetera, when you throw that visual into the mix, it really sort of starts to play with very primal things in people and audiences. And so I mean, I'm not going to say that there are parallels, but there are definitely correlations to this idea of sort of being the stranger in a strange land and doing as Romans do, sort of, so to speak. And that's kind of why I asked that question. And I'm so happy to know that it's been such a positive experience for you.
It has. I think though, to me it boils down to, I definitely, I mean, I will be the first person to say that in my first, year or 2 years, I was a trained monkey. Like, I didn't know what was going on. I was very lucky that I could reproduce sounds very easily, and I could, say things convincingly, and I can perform on stage to make that connection with the audience. But I didn't ever, I knew that I didn't want to just be a trained monkey. Like, I wanted to be able to, it was going to be more important to me to have a conversation with audience members after the show, or equally as important to have that conversation as it is to get up on stage and perform that music well. I've often thought about that. Uh a line in 我爱你中国, I love you China, is, I've given my best years to you, my motherland. And I'm always, I'm not always, I'm often asked to sing that song. And I always wonder, as an audience member, obviously the song to them has significance as a song. What, yeah, what is the layer? What layers are put upon when suddenly it's being delivered from somebody who clearly is not Chinese? Um, yeah, that's a question actually I'd like to ask. I'd like to ask an audience member. Definitely have some friends over there who I could ask that question to, and be, I have no idea what the answer will be. No idea.
It's one of these, I mean, I think we take it for granted as Western classical trained singers because we're hopping back and forth. We're told as part of our training, you have to study English, German, Italian, French. These are the
Right.
languages. And like, so we're used to kind of hopping back and forth between cultures,
Mm-hmm.
musically speaking. And,
Mm-hmm.
in the opera house, like part of that is just because it's so athletic. But then there's this thing about how people feel ownership over their culture. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we're always sort of a guest or an interloper in some ways. And I'm just fascinated. I mean, I've always been fascinated with this because I'm half, and so and I'm also half something that's not white nor black. And so,
Right.
I'm quite disconnected. I mean, it's something that I find fascinating about our friendship is that you are so connected to
Mm-hmm.
what is technically my culture. And I am so not connected to it. I mean, I'm obviously not in this way, not musically speaking.
No,
And
100%.
it's the question of like ownership and exchange and sharing, and when do you cross the line into appropriation, and what is appropriation? I mean, like,
I've been thinking about this a lot recently. I think about it especially because there are lots of pictures of me performing in China in my qipao, in my red qipao, which is, the traditional. For those of you who don't know what this is, it's the Mandarin collar. It's a very kind of slim fitting dress. I think it's a very traditional dress, and I often think to myself, um, you know, yeah, what is cultural appropriation in terms of what I am doing? Um, and is it cultural appropriation to get on stage and wear that dress? And ultimately, and this may be, I think I've thought this out well enough, but my perspective is that, I'm perfectly happy to go to China and perform in a Western dress. Um, And yet, when I'm performing in China, one of the first things that Chinese, concert organizers or television crews will ask me is, "Can you wear the red dress? Can you wear the qipao? Can you come and dress in our traditional dress when you're on stage singing in Chinese?" Um, and so for me, that to me is permission. That to me is permission to go and use that. I think also to me the fact that I now have such deep roots in China and such a deep connection um, to the culture and the language and the people and all and everything that I've learned being there. It is truly my second home in the world. My first is, of course, wherever my family is, wherever they are, whether it's here or in Europe or in the United States. And the second is China, and that's purely for me. And I, yeah, I understand the confusion. It's confusing for me too, because again, we're only talking about 10 years ago that this all so dramatically came in and took over my life.
so we've got a few minutes left, and I want to just reiterate to everybody who's watching, please, if you have any questions for our illustrious and very accomplished guest here, please throw them in the comment section of Facebook. We do have one question. Frank Villela, our board chair, has a question
Hi,
for you.
Frank.
He says hi. Um,
Yay.
he's just wondering if Adolfo has learned any Chinese, and also, I mean, he asked if your son is learning Chinese. I think you said Amadeo was studying, I mean, in Chinese school. So does he still speak any? And like, how is his Chinese?
So, Adolfo, no, he really does try. He
Like a
does
true
try.
Italian.
Yeah. I teach him a few things every single time we go. The same things every single time we go.
Oh.
um, Amedeo, Amedeo, yes, went to the school, but of course that was a very short period of time. He's come back and forth with me for longer periods, 1 and 2 months when I've been over there doing projects, and I make him study when he's there. He's an excellent parrot. He's an excellent mimic, so he hears the tones very easily. So he and I have officially started studying Mandarin. I am his Mandarin teacher right now.
Oh, wow.
Every Sunday afternoon, we've got I'm teaching him from the book. We're gonna take the exams. There are exams for just like in any foreign language. You can take these exams to kind of test levels. And he's doing very well. He's also got a lot of languages floating around in his brain, and um, he's a smart guy, and I think he knows, because he sees the use of it. He knows how frequently we go back to China. Um, Now, as he's getting a little bit older, it makes sense to him why he's being forced to do this.
Interesting. I wish that when my parents were forcing me to learn languages, I had understood the value. Um, so I have one question about, like, things in China have been politically fraught over the last, I mean, I'd say I feel like it's really increased and intensified,
Mhm.
particularly on the international stage in the last like 5 years. And I mean, I just wonder, do you have feelings about that? Is it difficult for you to navigate? I mean, the one time I've performed, well, I've performed in Japan a lot, but I performed in Hong Kong a few years ago. And I remember going and just thinking I was going to just sing a Carmina Burana with the Hong Kong Phil and getting there. And I opened the program book, and it turns out that our concert was in celebration of 20 years of Two Systems, One Nation. And it was one of those situations where I'd sort of wished that I had known that before flying all the way over there and agreeing to sing the gig. So I just wonder, I mean, is that difficult to navigate? And do you have feelings about it? And do the people
I
you know and love over there have troubles navigating it?
I do have feelings about it. It's not difficult to navigate in the sense that um, when I'm there, my goal is to be a connector and to be a bridge and um, to be musical and to use music to find the common threads between us. The most difficult thing, of course, is that as Chinese and American relationships were breaking down over the past 4 years, just seeing that become a little bit more difficult, and hoping uh, personally that I was being judged for my own contributions and not as a representative of my nation's government at the time. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. But ultimately, I'm trying to be like Dolly Parton, right? Well, on so many ways, I'd like to be like Dolly Parton, but
Wouldn't we all?
Dolly is not political, and she simply wants to use her music to connect people. And yes, I have feelings on so many different things that happen in China and in the United States. And ultimately, I still just as naive as it sounds, I just want it to be about the music.
Well, I mean, it. Music is a powerful thing, as we've been talking about this whole time, in terms of cultural connection, cultural exchange,
Hmm.
and building. I mean, we live in increasingly divided times, so
Yeah, for sure.
any opportunity to connect is, I mean, that's a political statement in and of itself, as much as Dolly wishes that it weren't. Um, we have a hilarious question, and it's not hilarious. It's a wonderful question from
Okay.
Bob and Terry Ryan, who also say hello from San Francisco.
Hi, Bob and
And
Mary! Yay!
I feel like an idiot because, I mean, we've been talking this whole time and we're almost out of time now, but we marketed this as about something to talk about your book. And I guess
That's
technically
fine.
we have been, but Bob and Terry are like, will you talk about the book? And Bob and Terry, I'm sorry I didn't ask the question earlier, but please
I
talk about the book.
have one right in front of me. This has been my labor of love for the past 2 years. So, in 2011, I met my co-writer, my mentor, Catherine Chu, at ICING. And I very naively, after the first year, because like you said, I'm a huge lover of language and of dictions. I like just the study of sounds within languages. And I love International Phonetic Alphabet. I'm a true linguist nerd. And I had dissected those Chinese sounds in that first summer. And I said, Catherine, I want to write a diction book, a Chinese diction book. And she was like, okay. She's like, why don't you learn the language? Why don't you become fluent? Why don't you learn the culture, sing more music, spend time in the country, and then we can have the conversation. And so that's what I did for the next 8, 9 years. And then in late 2018, I went back to her and I said, Catherine, I really want to write a diction book. And she's like, okay. So she and I set out to write this book, which is in the format of all of the other diction books that are used in North American conservatories to teach diction, which for people who don't know, it's the pronunciation of the language as opposed to the comprehension of the language. So, and a lot of singers have the ability to of course, pronounce languages that they don't sing in, or that they don't speak, but they sing in. And so we took Mandarin and we systemized it, and I spent a lot of time. My primary part of the book was really dealing with the diction and looking at the symbols, the International Phonetic Alphabet of Pinyin, which is the current mainland China transliteration that's used to get you from Chinese characters, from the Hanzi to sounds that we as Westerners would recognize. So this book covers not only the diction, but to me, more importantly, gives an amazing outline of the history of contemporary vocal Chinese literature. So this is literature. We're not talking Peking opera. We're not talking the regional theaters, singing theaters. This is primarily 1912, 1913, up until the Cultural Revolution, and then after the Cultural Revolution. And of course is still going today. It's this, we're seeing just, we have so many fantastic young Chinese composers who continue to build the repertoire for us. And so this is our contribution to the West, to hopefully inspire people to want to learn to sing in Mandarin and to learn the culture through the music, because I can't think of a better way to do it, honestly.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I was going to say, what are your hopes for the book? But it sounds like there are some really lofty hopes behind it, which are very worthy and kind of underline the importance of maybe wanting to explore it.
I think so. I think, there's just there's so much rich history there. It's fascinating too because of that huge break, of course, during the Cultural Revolution. Uh, there's just a lot of fascinating stuff that that you hear in the music, that you see in the poetry, in the textures and the harmonies. In many cases it is very like Western art song, and in other cases it's very specifically Chinese. And it's my favorite music in the world to sing. So of course I want to share it with everybody else.
It's amazing that you found that. It's so wonderful.
Yeah.
I mean, as someone who cares about you and loves you very much, I'm happy that you have found your calling in this way. And
Yeah.
You're doing a wonderful service for the rest of us, so we can learn how to, us Western people can learn how to do this. We are out of time, sadly, although I feel like we can always talk forever. So thank you everybody for joining us again. I'm sorry about the camera issues that I had. I don't know what is going on. Mercury is retrograde, so I assume that is what it is, and I'm going to blame it on that.
And today is Chinese New Year's Eve, and tomorrow is Lunar New Year. So 新年快乐 to anybody who's out there. 新年快乐, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. I'm going to eat a lot of noodles and fish tomorrow for long life and good luck. That's what my family does.
Yeah. Yes.
And I'm going to wear new clothes because that's what we did when I was a kid, and Stitch Fit is the thing.
This isn't your year. This is the year of the ox. So
My year was a couple years ago. I'm a horse.
Okay. Yeah, I'm a sheep. So I have to wait a number of years again.
I know. Our year's just passed. It's sad.
Yeah. What can I do?
It's okay. I'm sure that it's going to still be fortuitous for all of us. So anyway, thank you so much, everybody, for joining. As always, if you'd like to support CAIC's 2021 season broadcasts, you can do so with a tax-deductible donation at our website. As we're only online this season and we're not selling any tickets, your donations to support this programming remain vital. So if you're feeling generous and you are able to, please consider it. We will be off next week with Heard Over the Piano, but we will return on February 18th with a conversation with mezzo-soprano Sasha Cooke. So we're going to turn the tables on her. She's been doing her Sasha sessions, and I get to interview her instead. And so we'll be back February 18th, and that's going to be at our normal time, 7 p.m. Central. And also, looking ahead, please mark your calendars for the broadcast of our Winter Leader Lounge, which is going to feature baritone Edward Nelson and pianist Ronnie Michael Greenberg. And it's going to be broadcast, the premiere broadcast is at 7 p.m. Central, March 5th, and it will be available for on-demand streaming through March 7th. And actually, Eddie and Ronnie are going to be on Heard Over the Piano on March 4th. So mark your calendars for that as well. But again, off next week, back at our regular time, February 18th, 7 p.m. with Sasha Cooke. So we will see you in a couple of weeks. In the meantime, thank you so much. Christine Shea Tang says hello and is wishing a happy new year to both of us. Happy New Year. Thank you again for all your questions, and we will see you soon. Goodbye, Facebook, for now.
Bye bye.